raised in a Christian home, and God was always first in our home. We did it as a family, and every morning was started with family prayer. The age was between 10 and 11 years old. It was on a Sunday evening at the old First Pilgrim Holiness Church on the east side of Flint. I was sitting about 4 pews back from the altar that night, and Reverend Brown was preaching, and God nudged me. He said, "You need to be at the altar tonight, bud." Yeah, that was a exciting night that night. I went home feeling really great. Sometimes I wasn't walking spiritually, attending every Sunday, and I would send my kids always. After I got married, I would always send my kids because Grandpa and Grandma would come by and get them. When the 90s came around, God tapped me on the shoulder and said, you need to get it right. So I rededicated my life then at that point, and I've just been steady serving him ever since. 1994, I was working for the city, and that was an event that was a game changer for me. Me and two other fellows were working in the street in 1994, and it was after a flood, and we had a pump set up because some of the basements were backing up. It was in the north end of Flint. It was 1 o'clock in the morning, and at that point, 3 of us had our back on we were standing around the manhole. And at that point, a fellow was driving down the road at 25 miles an hour and didn't see us and ran right through us. It actually broke my leg in 3 places. Took me down, drug my leg through the manhole, and that's what actually broke it, and the car ended up on it. But the fellow that was on my right ended up with a broken ankle and a damaged, I don't know that he ever got full use back of his ankle, because the car actually ran right over his foot. The third person didn't get injured. He was the one that actually made the 911 call so that they could get there. In ER, I went into shock, and I was actually in a coma for 5 days. On the end of that week, the son, Mark, was supposed to get married at Flint First Wesleyan Church, and it came to their mind, if we can't have the wedding there, we'll have it here at Early Hospital. But God had his own plan, and at the end of 5 days, I rallied around. I came back around. On that Sunday, prior to that, was put in the bulletin the following Sunday, expect a miracle. So what happened was that was in the bulletin, and when Jackie brought the bulletin to the hospital that morning, or that afternoon, I had already rallied around and was sitting up in the bed when she showed up. At midnight, I went into surgery. They cut my cast off, and put a rod in my leg and screwed the whole thing back together. And then they told me the next day, on the 6th day, if you're going to get to that wedding, you're going to have to walk down the hall with crutches. So they brought me the crutches, and I stumbled along with the crutches. And then they said, you're going to have to go down a couple more hallways. So I managed to get down both hallways, and then the following morning, they turned me loose. And on that Saturday, this happened on July the 20th or 21st, and that Saturday on the 30th, I was at the wedding in a wheelchair. That was when you talk about the 90s, when I talk about the 90s, I rededicated my life. That was when I knew that God had a purpose for my life, and he kept me here for a reason. So that was the springboard for me. In 1969, I was drafted, and I was drafted in the Army, and I went willingly. I had gotten out of high school in '68, and then I knew everybody was going. Out of the school that I was at, they were all going and being drafted, and it was just your turn. So in '69, when the time came to go, then I went willingly. I went to training in Kentucky for 6 weeks, and then I was transferred to Fort Polk, Louisiana for 6 more weeks. So at the end of 12 weeks training, they figure you're good enough to go to war. And I ended up being sent to Vietnam for 12 months. One of the things that they give you when you first get inducted in the service is they give you a testament. And I had that testament. They gave it to me. I carried it in my duffel bag before I went to Nam, and every day that I was in Nam, I put it in a plastic bag. I put it in my and I read it faithfully. When I came back, I put it. It was still in my fatigue pocket, and this is 40 years later, and it's still in my fatigue pocket. So it's still there. That's one of the memories that I will never give and that will never forget. That was not my saving. I don't. But I know that was my communication with God, being with me every time, every moment there. Because there were a lot of people that went there and a lot of people that didn't come home. And one of the things that I did openly was when I came back, is I knew when I was going to go that I stood up in church and I told them, I'm leaving to go to the Army, and I'd appreciate your prayers. And when I came back, that was the first thing I did, was I stood up and thanked the congregation for praying for me to bring me home. So those are 2 highlights in my life. So, you know, that's those are big events. But those are both God moments. You know, when you wonder why you're here and what is God doing with you, then, you know, those are both events could have been the end. At 19 or 20 years old, that could have been the end. At 42 years old, 45 years old, that could have been the end. And as God has chose to keep me around and keep doing what I do, or what I'm doing. And when I rededicated my life in the early 90s, I said to God, I said, make me an instrument. Use me however you want to. So I'm His. And I'll do it till I can't do it anymore. So